the session. So thank you all for joining us today for Teen. We've had a great day at Teen Summit. And this session is addressing youth homelessness. What can libraries do? And I am pleased today that we are joined by Dr. Julie Ann Winkelstein, who's a librarian, teacher, activist, and author of Libraries and Homelessness, an Action Guide. Um, and we're also joined by a fantastic group of panelists today that are going to be presenting to us. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will have time to answer questions at the end of the session. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Julie, and your team.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. Hi everyone. I'm Julie Ann Winkelstein. I use the pronouns she and her, and I'm currently stably housed. I'm really excited to be part of this panel to talk about youth homelessness and libraries. I have notes here in case you're wondering, because otherwise I get really sidetracked. I'm going to speak briefly about libraries, and then I'm going to be I'm not going to be monitoring the chat because Jonathan will be. We'll be answering most questions at the end, although I think Signe might have a little Q&A after her presentation on McKinney-Vento. My goal for libraries is for you to become part of the caring community surrounding and supporting unhoused youth, as well as learning more about the role libraries can play in preventing youth homelessness through a deeper understanding of their lived experiences. Because each community and each library is unique, what action you can take will depend on many factors. It will depend on your community, your budget, your library's mission and vision statements. Can you go back? Oops, sorry. Thank you. And other library staff, who you are, and the role that you play in your library, and much more. So there's no like one size fits all for what you could do to address or help prevent youth homelessness. It'll really depend on who you are and what your library is like. I just want to say, because I know that as helpful people, librarians, we tend to think that we can solve everything. So you aren't going to solve youth homelessness, but you can change lives through partnerships, through conversations, through sharing your library spaces, just through caring, through access and respectful attitudes and awareness of the power of language. There are many ways to take action, and I hope our panel today will help you find one of those ways and become part of this caring community. Okay, next slide. Thank you, Signe. So as you think about this, I want to encourage you to ask yourself or your library staff the questions that I have here. So who are the resources, the programs, the bathrooms, the policies, the rules designed for in your library? So when you set these all up, who was in your head? Who were you thinking? And how might these policies create barriers for some people, such as people who are experiencing homelessness, including the young people? Who are you purposely welcoming when you put up a sign, when you create a display, when you create resources, when you buy books and other resources? Who's in your mind? Who are you purposely welcoming? And how does the library staff know when there's somebody outside of the intended audience? How does your library address the needs of the people, such as the unhoused youth, who may be outside of your intended audience? And they may not be. You may be already doing this. What are your fears about addressing this? What are your fears about addressing this topic, and where do you think they came from? And what could be another approach? Like once you're aware of that, what could be another approach that you could take? Next slide. So as you're thinking about some of these barriers to service, as you think about this and ask yourself these questions, you may become aware of some of the barriers that might already be existing in your library, and maybe help you think about how could you remove some of these barriers or lower them? So library culture, might the assumptions that you make in your library get in the way of serving unhoused youth? Public conduct policies, what are they? And how might they impact unhoused youth? Fines and fees, do you have fines and fees? What barriers could these create? Requiring a permanent address. Do you require a permanent address to access the computers or the library's resources? And if so, what could you do maybe to make that different so that it wouldn't be a barrier? Is there an age requirement? When we're talking about unhoused, unaccompanied youth, it's ages 12 to 24. So you may have that somebody who's 13 years old needs to have something signed by a parent or guardian. That could be a barrier. And responses to behaviors. What is the focus and the impact of the responses to behaviors that aren't consistent with the underlying assumptions that are part of your library culture? What kind of language are you using? Is it positive or is it negative? Is the stress on compliance or is it on a deeper understanding using a trauma-informed lens? I hope that these few questions will be useful to you. And now I'm going to pass it on to Signe. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Signe Lynch. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve in the role of State Coordinator of Homeless Education with the Maine Department of Education. So really working with the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, which I am here to share a little bit about with this group, particularly as it pertains to our young people. And this is just one important thing to be aware of when working with young people and families experiencing housing instability, and really thinking about considering building that bridge with your local school systems. So before I just dive into my section of highlighting this program and statute, I'm just curious if people don't mind putting in the chat just their familiarity with the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. One being, I've never heard of this before. Five being, I'm an expert. I could be giving the whole presentation myself. It would be really helpful just to see where folks are at in their understanding. Awesome. All right. So seems like we've got some familiar or some new folks to McKinney-Vento and some people who have certainly heard of it before. So going to cover some of the basics here. So for those that have not worked with this statute before, this is the first major federal legislative response to homelessness. And it was first passed in 1987. It's had multiple amendments along the way. The most recent being part of Every Student Succeeds Act in 2015, which changed some of our educational pieces. One of the things that it does establish in this statute is that every local education agency, so school district, has to have a McKinney-Vento liaison. So someone who is assigned to the role of working with families and young people who are experiencing homelessness to serve as the point of contact and provide services. And they are often folks in a school system that are wearing multiple hats. So it could sometimes be a school administrator, sometimes it's a school social worker, but they really are the point of contact, and that does have to be a designated person at each place. So they really are the first point of contact that you would be having with a school. For example, if you were working with a young person or family that you knew was experiencing homelessness and they might not be connected to their local school system yet, this would be who you'd be reaching out to. And every state has a system for getting you that contact information. In Maine, we have a contact lookup tool available on our state website. Something to be aware of when we talk about homelessness broadly is that we do not have a federal alignment on the definition of homelessness. And this is just a helpful tool that was created by the National Network for Youth, a great national organization. And it really breaks down just what the variations are in the definitions of homelessness across federal agencies. So just something to be aware of. And often when we are talking about homelessness in the education world, we're looking at all the various forms of housing instability that families and young people might find themselves in that would present as a barrier to education. So we really are looking at a really fully encompassing picture and definition of homelessness. And what that definition is in education world is that it's any student who is attending a public school, preschool through grade 12, who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So those are the three key words for McKinney-Vento: is fixed, regular, and adequate. And really what that means when I'm talking to community providers and schools, can the student go to the same place every night? And is that place safe and sufficient? That's that fixed, regular, and adequate. And if it is missing one of those key components, it's where we would have our school staff and community providers that are working with families ask some of those follow-up questions and potentially work to get them identified through their school system for additional supports. So also building out that definition a little bit more in the federal statute, these protections really apply to any student that would be living in a campground or a trailer. We see this a lot, students that are living in a camper that's been placed in someone's backyard. And this also includes students that are living in a hotel or motel because they lack their own fixed, regular, and adequate place to reside. Couchsurfing is a really big piece of McKinney-Vento and our definition of homelessness. So it falls into what we would call the larger category is doubled up, which really just means sharing housing due to a loss of housing for economic hardship or similar reason. Couchsurfing falls into that. Any student that is living in a shelter or a transitional living program, students that are living in a car. This is a photo actually from our blueberry fields in Washington County in Maine, and it's really in reference to migrant education program, which is another federal program. So students that are working with their families may be traveling, or they themselves as a young person may be traveling for seasonal agricultural or fishery work. And those students often are identified as McKinney-Vento because the seasonal housing that employers put them up in would not be considered adequate, which really plays into this other piece of McKinney-Vento, which is substandard housing. Substandard housing is often what we would think of families that lack a vital utility. That's a very common thing where we have families who have had their electricity turned off because they weren't able to make the payments on their power bill. Heating is a big one for New England, right? Where they're not able to safely heat their home in the winter or adequately heat their home in the wintertime. This also could be our students that may be coming in consistently with things like bed bugs or lice, vermin in the home, things that would be not adequate for a student, a young person, or a student that's living in the home. Overcrowding is another big one. It again falls into that doubled up category. So too many folks in one space. And this is just an example of running out of heat. Here's the definitions that are in statute, and you will have these slides available so you can reference them. But just as I was speaking, this is all of those definitions of what qualifies a student as experiencing homelessness under education's definition. Most common situation that families and young people find themselves in is that doubled up. So sharing housing due to loss of housing. And really some of the key clarifying questions that we would ask families are really, do they have a legal right to be in that home? Are they on a lease? Or is the person who is allowing them to stay there, could they ask that family or young person to leave at any time and with no legal repercussions? So there's lots of different considerations in McKinney-Vento eligibility, and students being identified for services under McKinney-Vento as experiencing homelessness is always a case-by-case situation. A really important category within McKinney-Vento is our unaccompanied homeless youth population. And what this really means is it's young people that are experiencing homelessness. They're in a nighttime residence that is not fixed, regular, and adequate. And they are also in that nighttime residence without being in the physical custody of their legal guardian. And so unaccompanied homeless youth could be students, for example, that may have run away from home. They may have been asked to leave the home of their legal guardian due to family conflict. Or it could be students that the entire family themselves are experiencing homelessness, and the young people are able to go live with another relative who's not their legal guardian for a certain time, and the adults may be going to a shelter or living in their car and they have that separation. But if they're in that nighttime residence without being in the physical custody of their legal guardian, they'd be considered unaccompanied homeless youth. And unaccompanied homeless youth have additional rights under the McKinney-Vento statute to enroll themselves in school, have some autonomy in some of their educational decision-making processes. And really, it's all about making sure that these students do not have additional barriers to accessing education and being able to fully participate in school and school activities, just like any of their other peers that have that consistency of parental and guardian support in their life. And one thing I always like to mention for McKinney-Vento, and when we talk about homelessness in general, is just our own vulnerabilities to experiencing homelessness. We all have these vulnerabilities, and we're all susceptible to things that are outside of our control. So things such as a natural disaster that could impact your home, experiencing something like a house fire, and having that loss of housing. And when we think about this, for example, if you experience the tragedy of losing your home to a house fire, if you have children in your local school system, and the place that you would go after having that unexpected traumatic loss of housing is the place that you would end up going, is that place within the town that you're living in? And that's a consideration because, for example, if you had a sibling that lived a few towns over and they are willing to have you come move in with them, and you're going to live with them till you're able to rebuild your home, till you find your own apartment, you've just experienced this traumatic incident in your life. And if you have children that attend your local school system, one of the things that McKinney-Vento protects is really school stability. So if there's an unexpected loss of housing that places you into a nighttime residence that is outside of the catchment area of your local school system, McKinney-Vento would step in, and the school system would help and provide, for example, transportation back to that school of origin if it was in the best interest of those students to provide that sense of stability, even though there's so much other uncertainties going on in your life at that time. And you'll hear me when I talk about McKinney-Vento publicly, I always call it the McKinney-Vento program, McKinney-Vento, McKinney-Vento, just because the word homeless is so stigmatized in our society. And so really, we've done a lot of work in the state of Maine of just reframing this from the homeless program in our school systems to the McKinney-Vento program. And it really is a resource for anyone in a community in a time of need. So if there was something that occurred, McKinney-Vento in your school system would be able to be supportive and have some resources to ensure that young people are able to continue their education and have supports and barriers removed to accessing that education, even though there's a tremendous amount of instability outside of school. And so a lot of that just narrative work and making sure that we're being mindful of the words that we're using and not stigmatizing students, young people, and their families. Just a quick, I wanted to just provide some context too for like how McKinney-Vento works. So this is federal statute. We have folks at the U.S. Department of Education that provide things like non-regulatory guidance. There's a National Technical Assistance Center that anyone, including myself, a library, young people could call a hotline and get some answers about McKinney-Vento on eligibility services, things like that. Then there's the state education agency. Every single state has a state education agency. I work for the Maine Department of Education. There's always going to be someone at these agencies that is the point of contact, that knows the policies, that knows the statute. We distribute funding to our schools and help with the funding pieces for them. We do dispute resolution. And then at the local level is where we have our McKinney-Vento liaisons. That eligibility is determined and those services are provided daily to those students. What schools can offer students that are experiencing homelessness under McKinney-Vento? So any student that is identified for McKinney-Vento receives free meals. They have that right to that transportation to the school of origin. So the school that they were last regularly attending before a loss of housing, students can immediately enroll without required documents. So we know that sometimes when there's a lot of instability and movement, there might not be things like your birth certificate or something like that. That also includes, proof of address, right? So if you don't have proof of address, you can still enroll in your school system if you are temporarily staying with someone else. And we see that quite a bit if there's a student sometimes in Maine. Maine is a very geographically large state. And so we have students sometimes that are have to go to a shelter that's a few hours away from the home that were last at. And they would enroll in that school system usually. But we want to make sure that those barriers to enrollment are removed and that they can get through the door as quickly as possible. Schools also can provide school supplies, clothing, hygiene items, access to showers and laundry. Our students that are unaccompanied homeless youth are independent students on the FAFSA, so they're eligible for financial aid. Schools also provide referrals for mental health, housing, and other needs. So there's a lot of partnership in the work of McKinney-Vento and schools, a lot of reliance on hearing what's happening in communities, having referrals coming from community providers and places like libraries, and having that partnership is a really, really critical piece of McKinney-Vento in schools. And students can have their fees covered for academic records and other school activities that are going on. Early childhood education is something to be mindful of. So there's Head Start programs have priority spots for students that are experiencing homelessness, making sure that those referrals are happening. And a great piece about McKinney-Vento, and is rare in federal statute, is that it does really allow schools to address needs that come up and through other extraordinary or emergency assistance needed. So it does allow for some creativity that schools can work through to meet the needs and ensure that this student population is able to access school daily. And here's just our definitions of what we mean when we say school of origin and school of residence. So just a common misconception that sometimes comes up with McKinney-Vento is that it's school choice, but it really is about school stability. So it's a matter of making a best interest determination for a student to continue to have school stability in the school of origin where they were last regularly attending, or that immediate enrollment in the school of residence if that's in their best interest. And once a student is identified by their school as a McKinney-Vento student, they're eligible for those services for the entire academic year. And why that's important is, for example, if you had a student or a family that you knew that had a loss of housing in November, they move out of district with a relative, they're doubled up for much of the rest of the school year. And then in May, they are able to find permanent housing. That permanent housing might be in another community. They would still be able to continue receiving transportation, for example, and continue out that school year in the school of origin. So having that school stability for the entire academic year. And there's no time limit on how long a student can receive McKinney-Vento services through their school. We have some families that have a lot of instability in their life, and they are eligible as McKinney-Vento students year after year. So there's no, you received services over the past 2 years, you've hit your max, you're done. None of that. There's no time limit on how long a student can receive McKinney-Vento services. If they are school-aged eligible, they're able to receive and be identified by their school. Just an important clarification. So if you are working with child welfare, for example, if you had a student that was in the custody of the child welfare system, those are students that are considered foster care. And I just want to reiterate that foster care students, if they are in the custody of child welfare, they are also eligible to receive very, very similar rights and services. So it's just an important clarification that these two unique student populations have unique protections to ensure education is provided and that they have a sense of stability and connection. So really those big pieces of immediate enrollment, school of origin transportation, best interest determinations, and those supportive services that can wrap around a student. Funding for McKinney-Vento really is, a lot of it comes from our Title I funding, and then there's McKinney-Vento subgrants, so federal grants that are received by each state, and then each state might have unique funding available too. So in Maine, we have some unique funding lines for preventing student homelessness, but that would be a state dependent and something you should certainly check in with your state to see what other programs exist or what other funding lines support this unique population. And just a quote to transition us to some of our dialogue with the Maine Statewide Youth Action Board. When we really considering our youth as partners, when we work to empower students, we understand that they are not the leaders of tomorrow, but that they are already leaders with voices that need to be heard. To create equity-centered, trauma-informed schools, our students are our most impactful partners. So with that, I do want to open the door to any questions about McKinney-Vento specifically, and then we're going to transition over to our New Beginnings and Maine Statewide Youth Action Board to hear from them and their great insight. Any questions on McKinney-Vento specifically?
We just have one, which I was also wondering about how have federal cuts impacted the funding?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so McKinney-Vento and most of our like public education programs, federal funding lines are like front funded. So we receive a grant award notification July 1. Same is true for McKinney-Vento. So we are funded. One of McKinney-Vento among most of our public education funding lines is part of the proposed block grant, which would be a very challenging situation if those things are block granted. So it would be state discretion on how much funding is set aside. And there's some complexities in the statute of, what is upheld. There's a lot of movement right now at the state level to codify McKinney-Vento statute into state statute. Maine is fortunate enough to be a state that has McKinney-Vento protections codified in our state law. So we do have those protections, but it's something a lot of states are looking at. And from the U.S. Department of Education side, the McKinney-Vento team there is very, very small. They were part of the RIF, so they did lose their jobs in this most recent layoff, but they are coming back. I think there's a lot of uncertainty, but as of right now, they've been able to retain those staff there. But again, it's a very small team at the federal level. So a lot of uncertainty, but as of right now, we have not had a loss of funding.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we don't have any other questions right now. There may be some more that come in.
All right. So this is my contact information. They'll be on the slides, but I'm going to stop sharing so that we can all see one another. All right. So I will introduce, so we are fortunate enough to be joined by Gabe Smith from New Beginnings, and then our Maine Statewide Youth Action Board. Do you all want to introduce yourselves?
Well, Signe and I used to work together, so she's certainly capable of introducing me. But my name's also, I just want to say thank you, Signe, and that the state of Maine is very fortunate to have someone as passionate as you in that position. My name's Gabriel Smith, he, him pronouns. I'm the Community Services Director for New Beginnings. We're a private nonprofit in Lewiston, Maine. We service 9 counties across the state, well, 9 of the counties across the middle of the state of Maine. And I can explain a little more when it comes to my time to talk. I'd like to have our YAB members introduce themselves if they would like. or YAB specialist, Beverly.
I can go next. Let me see if this works so you all can see me. Can you see me? I can see me.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Beverly Hubbard. My pronouns are she, hers. I am the Maine Statewide Youth Action Board Specialist. I currently work for New Beginnings. Our two YAP members right now at the moment who are on the call are Eden and Shauna. Eden, if you want to introduce yourself, I can give you a moment to introduce yourself. I think I said that too quick, didn't I?
I can go first if you want, Bev.
Sure, if
Hello,
you want to.
everybody. My name is Shauna Lasky. I am a Youth Action Board member representing Cumberland County. Thank you.
And also, our Youth Action Board is a forum of young people ages 14 to 24 that have lived experiences of homelessness, housing instability, and or systematic things like juvenile justice, foster care, adoptive. I'm not a type of person to verify young people's lived experience when it comes down to it. If they say they have it, then it's not me to judge. The Youth Action Board is currently right now we have 3 active YAP members, and I'm trying to think of what else. I think my brain is spacing. I can pass it back to you, Signe.
Like, yeah, I can go ahead if that's all right, Signe. I won't take up much time. I just wanted to represent sort of the organizational side of things, and the ways in which maybe collaborations might look or work in that regard. New Beginnings is a private nonprofit, and we do receive funding from the federal government, the state government, from private foundations, individuals. We recently received a wonderful donation from a former young person that was in one of our programs, which was awesome. It's one way to describe it. As I said, my pronouns are he, him. I do have a degree in a master's degree in restorative justice, so that is the lens for which, brought me to this work. The way I ended up in this field is I was doing court diversion work, restorative justice court diversion work in one of our district courts. And I realized as part of that, we would match young people up with mentors. And those mentors would come back and report to me, the substandard conditions of many of the young people that we were working with. And it was disproportionate that the young people that were ending up in the justice system often were those with the least. And so when I realized that, I recognized that New Beginnings was an agency that supported that population in a different way, and I wanted to be a part of that. And so I came here about 5 years ago. My first job here was as our street outreach program coordinator. That includes a drop-in center here on site where young people can come and have basic needs met, including getting out of the cold or getting out of the heat in the summer. The heat's less of a challenge in Maine, just saying, but the winter months can be deadly. They're that cold. And so our drop-in center, just simply put, I'll try to be brief, tries to provide the basic needs resources that are available in any middle-class home to any young person, including a washer and a dryer, hygiene supplies. We have a shower where they can take showers. We have a clothing closet. We serve breakfast and lunch daily. We're open 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we work closely with the Auburn and Lewiston libraries, as well as all of the schools, high schools, some of the middle schools, alternative schools here in the area, to try to support them as well, and to have them help support us. And some of the ways they support us is in the referrals that Signe mentioned and that Julie mentioned. And by making referrals to us, letting us know when they run into a young person who needs the type of support that we can provide. We do street outreach in the libraries. We make sure that our information about our agency and the supports that we have available to young people are made available in the teen center, at the Lewiston Library, at the Auburn Library. If you're not familiar, Lewiston and Auburn it feels like one big city, but there's a river that divides them, and so they have 2 different names. But we work closely in both communities, and both communities are certainly connected. One of my responsibilities outside the street outreach program is the Youth Action Board. As they mentioned, it's a group of young people from across the state of Maine that utilize their lived experience to advise and impart their knowledge on legislative items, on the continuum of care, if you're familiar with that, which is basically, I won't take the time to explain it. You can Google continuum of care. It's pretty in depth, but they're advising, those professional boards, those groups of leaders in our state, and they're, you know, um, their voices are being heard, and that's what's really important to me. I can give you a brief example of the value of that. In the state of Maine, in order to obtain a driver's license, a young person under the age of 21 has to have 70 driving hours. If you're a middle-class kid in a home with a parent who has a car, that's not that hard to obtain. You can drive them to the grocery store every week, whatever. If you're an unhoused person with no access to a vehicle, how do you get a driver's license? And so it falls on an organization like New Beginnings to try to help with that. Well, as Signe knows, when she used to work here, the driving hours at a local driving school, for 10 hours, it's about $600. And so if you extrapolate that over 70 hours, that is a massive barrier to young people being able to access a driver's license in the state of Maine, where things are spread out. The ability to drive is very directly connected to the ability to maintain employment. And so we want our young people to work, but we're not giving them the tools to be able to do that. And that's a problem. And so, for instance, that might be a situation where a young person on our Youth Action Board might speak up and say, this is a well-intended policy and I get it. And also, let me tell you why it doesn't work for people like me. And so that's the real key to the Youth Action Board, is to be able to say those things out loud in spaces where it matters and where it makes an impact. And so I want to thank Julie for having us join. Libraries play a key role. It's one of the few publicly accessible sort of spaces in any given town or city, where a young person, or an old person for that matter, can find warmth and safety. And I understand that may not have been the original intention behind the creation of libraries. My guess is it was to educate, and that's fair. And I want to take a minute to say that not every community has a New Beginnings. In fact, in the state of Maine, not every community has a New Beginnings. As Signe mentioned, there's only 3 youth serving shelters across the entire state of Maine. New Beginnings runs one of them. And so, the resources that are available to any given library or librarian differ, and I understand that. And also, based in my restorative justice background, the community response is the key. And so it's about developing relationships along the community with other individuals with shared interest. And I'll give you a few examples of how we've worked and how libraries have helped support young people here. And so the Auburn Library checks out hotspots. And so why is a hotspot critical to the reality of an unhoused youth? Many of our young people downstairs have cell phones. They don't have plans. They don't have minutes. And so their cell phones only work when they're in a Wi-Fi area. That means they can't job search on their cell phone. They can't call back an employer. They can't call the shelter, that, unless they're in an area where there's a hotspot that they can access. Now, here in our drop-in center, we make access to Wi-Fi free, but they're not always on our property. And so young people can go to the Auburn Library. They can check out, they can get a membership. They can check out, is that what they call memberships? I apologize if that's incorrect. They can get a library card. They can check out this hotspot, and they can utilize that hotspot for 2 weeks. They can go back to the library. And unless there's a demand, they can check it out again. And so, what that does is it connects young people to the rest of the world. I mean, it's a key element. And it's not a library book. It's a different kind of resource. And when I found out that they were offering that, it brought a smile to my face, because it sounds like at some point somebody at that library said, I think this will be helpful to people. And I think it's a resource we might be able to provide. And so, another example is, we have a teen center in the Lewiston Library here. We do regular street outreach there. And the library he's a teen center librarian, recognized that there were certain items that were not available in the library that young people might need, and one of those things was condoms. And so the library budget didn't have a line for, say, for sex items. And so they reached out to us, and we were able to supply them through our prevention and training department with some of those resources that they could make available to young people if needed. And so that's just one example. I know not every library would want to do that. I get it. But that's just one example of how we've worked with them outside of, we leave brochures, informational packets, different things like that at the library. So when a young person in a tough situation shows up there, they have access to that information and they have access to our resources. I understand like police officers, librarians are not social workers. The truth is I don't expect a police officer to be a social worker. And I also know that they're working in the community with community members. And so I think community work and social work are not exactly the same thing. And I think that, the lens that I try to approach things from is sort of a community focused lens. And so it's about conversations and building bridges between libraries and local entities that can support the needs of the people that you're working with. I think too, there's space for very creative problem solving, and I'm not a librarian, so I don't understand all the ins and outs, but I know that one of the issues with the library here is that, people try to bring in, multiple pieces of luggage, et cetera. I can understand as someone who runs a drop-in center why bringing in all of those quantities of things all at once is problematic. So for the Lewiston Library here, we let them know, like, we actually have storage areas behind our building here where we can store young people's things for temporary periods of time if they're in transition, et cetera. And we could give them a ride to the library. So, if the young person has a way to connect with us, maybe we can store some of those things and that young person can more easily access the library without having to go through those sort of interactions or challenges that are understandable. And so, that's just one way that we support the library and trying to support that this population. I'm sure there's 100 other ways that it could happen. But at the end of the day, I think it's creativity and it's collaboration, resource sharing. And so I just want to say thank you to all of you. I'm very passionate personally about this population, and I've watched libraries play a role in their safety. And I appreciate it every single time. And I appreciate all of you. So thank you for taking the time to listen. I'll pass it off to the Youth Action Board. They're much more the rock stars than I am. And I just want to, thank the Youth Action Board and the members that were able to make it today, for their lived experience and for their, vulnerability and sharing it with such a large audience. So I'll pass it to Bev.
Thank you, Gabe. I appreciate that. Also, I was trying to find the final draft of the questions real quick. But yeah, you're welcome, Julie. Trying to find the questions real quick. Sorry, I'm on my cell phone. Just so I can pull them up and put them in the chat.
While you're looking for those, I just wanted to say to people that since we don't have a lot of time, there's a lot we're not saying. And so my email, I think, is on one of the slides. If not, I'm going to put it in the chat, and I can provide you an action plan template if you decide you would like to take an action. And I can also provide you with a glossary, but I want to talk with Gabe to make sure we include his restorative justice, but I have a very, very long glossary of terms. And both of those I think are really helpful to some of the language that we're using today, or some of the, what is restorative justice? Some of you might be thinking, and we just really don't have time to go into that because we want to hear from the young people. But I just wanted to, so I'll put my email and then just email me and I'll consult with Gabe first. And then I'll send you both of those things. Thanks.
Can't find the copy that I sent. That's so weird. All right, maybe.
Do you want me to look in my email and find the last list you sent me, and then just paste it into the chat? Would that be
Yes,
helpful?
can you? For some odd reason, I can't find the last copy that I sent you. Sorry. Not very prepared. That's not good. No good. Um, but yeah, we could. They're pretty basic questions too. Eden, Shauna, do you remember the document that I sent you with the library questions for this panel?
Yes, I'm currently in my email looking for you right now, Bev. I know I found it this morning and I brought it back up, but for some reason, it must be down lower.
Yeah, Google does not like me. I was trying to find the second copy because I think there's two. That's my fault. Um, what I'll do is I'm gonna make a copy of this copy. Too many copies. That's okay. Too many copies is better than not enough. Anyway, I'll put, I'm gonna share it with you guys real quick. Oh, wait, no, it's already shared. I just went on. Yay. Oh, no, no. All right, sorry. Just do that.
Hey, Bev, I've some of the questions here. I don't know if it's the final.
Okay. I made two different copies, but it's only because I wanted to make sure that I sent it out to everyone first. You know what I mean? I was like, hey, how's this look? Sometimes I can be annoying with my emails. Okay, I just sent a copy.
Are you okay? Because I have the original. Oh, good. All right.
I just put a bunch of the questions in the chat. It's copy and pasted, so it's not easy to separate the questions, but if that's helpful.
Yeah, that was the first one, and then she added a
Oh,
few.
you have a new one.
There was a few,
Yeah, I added a few additions because I
but we
can't
could just
find the copy.
okay. They currently have a library card. We was if no, why not? Was one of them.
Okay, well, what I can do is I can read the questions out loud one by one just to get a feel for it. The first question is, do you currently have a library card? Yes or no? How often do you visit a physical library location? Weekly, monthly, few times a year, maybe never? What is the main reason you visit the library? Borrow books, use computers, Wi-Fi, attend programs, study, workshop. Do you primarily borrow physical books or use digital resources like ebooks, audiobooks, streaming, like streaming services through Wi-Fi? Some people do that, like Tubi and stuff, to watch movies. What is your favorite type of program and event that the library offers? If it could be offered, book clubs, job readiness, craft workshops, tech training. How important is free, reliable Wi-Fi access at your library to you? Very important, somewhat important, not important. Am I reading too quick?
No,
Okay.
I think they're in the chat too. The same questions that you're reading. Gabe pasted them in, I think.
Yeah, I think if you just go each question and let the two
Yeah.
members respond, that would be perfect.
Okay, stop me if I'm going too quick. Do you use the library primarily as a quiet workspace or a space for your social interactions? Do you have children? Well, do you have children, dependents? How often do you participate in youth or children libraries? If you don't use the library, if you don't use the library often, what is the biggest reason why? Lack of time, location, transportation issues, you don't know what's available. And what is a new service or resource you wish, what is a new service or resource you wish your local library offered? Okay. And also too, these are pretty basic questions. Shauna, is there any question that speaks to you that you would want to speak to? I'll let you go first.
Hi, Bev. I'm just reading right now.
You're good. Take your time. It,
And I would just want to add on to one of the questions, I think that we adjusted it is, do you feel welcome at the library? And if
yeah,
so,
that's why I was trying to find the original because I really like the.
yeah, it's fine. Just, do you feel welcome? And if so, why? What makes you feel welcome? If not, why not?
Sometimes rewording it makes it sound a little bit better. It's easier. And also, I can also just speak to like as a young person going to the library. For years, I used to pay $5 for my library card until I found out about the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act in high school. I didn't know about it until high school. Somebody had told me about it, and I was able to get a free library card because I was eligible for those services. And because of that, and because of somebody believing in me in a lot of senses too, I was able to be the support I am for young people. I was a former YAB member that was promoted to the main statewide Youth Action Board specialist in 2023, and I love this work and everything that comes with it. There is a lot of weird circumstances, and sometimes you get people where you don't really know what their intentions are, but at the end of the day, um, the YAB, it has a lot of experience, and we believe that a lot of programs that are for young people should be built by those young people. And if you're building something for someone, you should be having them at the table to make sure that they can advocate or say, you know what, I don't like that, or I love this, but let's change that. Because I love this work. And there are a lot of questions in here.
Oops. Those hearts were for you, not me. I don't know.
Thank you for the hearts.
So I do want to say, like, when I really haven't been to a library for a long time, but the big reason I did used to go to use the Wi-Fi, but the big reason I couldn't, I'm a big book person, and I always would love to go to the library and check out books, but I didn't have a stable place to live, so I couldn't do that. And I know that's a big issue here already, but that that it definitely is a problem. Also, sorry, I'm just kind of thinking about what I'm gonna say before I say it. So, sorry, Bev.
Yeah, I would have to agree with what Shauna said too. I know experiencing homelessness. Um, I remember losing a bunch of books and my mom getting the bill in the mail that she owed over $200 for anime books that I had checked out and never brought back. And when she found them, She brought them back, but still had to pay the $200 for the overbookment fee, and that came out of my allowance. So
Yes, and a lot of the I don't know if it's a thing anymore, but you couldn't like make an account or like register, like get a book out or use the library or use the computers or anything without an address. And I just think there has to be like ways around that or something we can figure out. Like we were talking about to use the shelter for an address or maybe the school, but I know that's like I don't know how that whole thing works. I know it's very touchy, but something. And what Gabe was talking about, the storage, the lockers, that's a very big one too, because kids, we carry everything we own when you are homeless, and everybody knows that. So it's not like we could drop our stuff off and then go in. And you know, and there's not a safe space for us to put it. So maybe like lockers where I'm not too sure, but
Well, if I can just quickly say here at New Beginnings, the youth use our drop-in address, 134 College Street, Lewiston, Maine. We have about, according to the mailman, probably 350 residents living in this building, and it's not residential at all. But they're able to use this as their mailing address for those reasons. And so, um, you know, sometimes we run into issues where where they look it up and they're like, that's not a residential address, and then we have to talk to them. But that's one thing that we do here at New Beginnings to help young people in that situation is to allow them to use our addresses. And then we collect their mail and we distribute it to them as we get it also.
Eden, did you want to speak?
Yeah, so while I was homeless, I spent quite a bit of time at the library. Um, and very similar to what New Beginnings does, the shelter I stayed at let us use their residence, like their address as a residence. And I think that it's unfortunate that some youth have access to those things and other youth don't, based on the ability to have an address versus not having an address. And like Shauna was saying, I think there's definitely something that should be done so that everyone has access to books, not only for entertainment, but for knowledge as well. I know for myself, I spend a lot of time doing like research on my rights and what I can and can't do, and what I have access to as a homeless youth. And I think that it was really helpful. And I think that more homeless youth and adults should have access to knowledge.
That's a great idea. That would be a great program at a library, everybody.
yeah, and I was gonna just say that a lot of shelters have money set aside for certain things, like if you need a library card or birth certificate, sometimes they have money set aside for certain things like that, or like finding like your McKinney-Vento liaison, somebody that might know those resources. I know from personal experience that some young people do go through certain things and they don't know how to reach out to someone. They don't feel very comfortable. So it can be very hard and stressful to keep and find resources for young people. I saw somebody's comment in the chat. I did want to answer it. Somebody, Jane Knight, she, hers, is there a Bill of Rights or something similar for young people that helps them and helps inform? Well, is there a Bill of Rights or something similar for young people that helps inform this work across the country? And yes, there is. So the Youth Action Board, when we first started, we worked with the state of Maine and also True Colors United, who had a youth action society, who helped the Youth Action Board build up advocacy. learn certain things about like grants and grant writing and a bunch of wild, crazy things. So in a lot of states nationally, there are a lot of wow. If in a lot of states now, currently in America, there are certain nonprofit organizations that invest in youth action boards which is what we do. Youth Action Board is a program of young people that have lived experiences of homelessness that want to advocate. And we work with youth providers. We actually helped Maine Housing edit the coordinated entry tool. And we helped build and make reviews of the youth addendum, which every state does. For the youth addendum is for the point in time count, which is usually done the beginning of the year. For the state of Maine, we will be doing our point in time count January of 2026. Very excited for it.
Just for
The YAP does a lot of things with presentations and just in general, like advocacy, many, many things. There's too many things to count. And there's a lot of timeline data. I did send out a presentation to you, Julie, just as like a little refresher for anybody. But yeah, Gabe, I'm sorry, I almost called you Eden. I'm sorry.
If I can just jump in really quickly, point time counts a national attempt to access semi-accurate data related to the amount of people that are homeless at a given point in time. And so the reason I wanted to speak up is because generally speaking, community partners can take part in that point in time count and can help. Quite honestly, federal dollars and other dollars are directly associated to those numbers. And they aren't generally very accurate because there's just people all over the place and, the number of people can't do it. And so you might be interested in looking up the point in time count and seeing if there's a way that you could be helpful in collecting more accurate data if you're interested.
Yeah, there are libraries that have participated in the point in time count and across the United States. And in the glossary, you've asked me for, if you email me, we include I include an explanation of continuum of care and point on count, time count, things like that you're gonna be wondering about because there's all this language that people have to learn. If you're unhoused, you have to learn how to speak this language. So great point, Gabe. Thank you.
Also, the Youth Action Board, we have a manual with all the acronyms. So every young person that joins as a Youth Action Board gets a manual with all the acronyms. Some people have a hard time accessing it, and that's fine. It can be really difficult without Wi-Fi or a technical device if you are experiencing something, like a hardship. But,
Yeah, and that was the one thing last I was going to say. That's something I learned from the Youth Action Board was just in any presentation that you're giving, if you are using acronyms, just really clarifying what that acronym is. It's so important. And I have learned so many acronyms as a result. Acronyms that I didn't even think I don't think I understood. I just used, and then I was like, oh, that's what it is. And it's such a valuable thing that I think so many of us overlook, but just always defining that acronym.
Yeah, and there's definitely library speak. In libraries, we use a lot of acronyms. And we forget that people may not know what circs are or, just all this language that we use. So yeah.
Yeah,
I really appreciate hearing from folks. I know I want to be mindful of time. We are a few minutes over. We did have a couple of questions. I don't know if there's other folks that have some questions, if people stick around, if there's any other questions that people have. Appreciate hearing from all of you, especially hearing from the youth folks from the Youth Action Board. We had, and there is an evaluation that Chris just put in as well. And as Julie mentioned, and the other presenters, if you send us any of the resources that you talked about, we have a virtual tote bag that we can share with everyone today, because I know there's a lot of things that weren't covered today and a lot of questions that folks may have, especially sort of because we have people from a lot of different states here today, of like if you are working in a library in one of those states, where is like the best place to start to find resources like New Beginnings and other resources that might be available to support youth in your area. So I want to thank all of our presenters, and I don't know if we have any other questions, but I appreciate you all joining us today. And again, send us those links, and we'll share it out with everybody. And we, I think, have emails as well that people have shared in the chat that we can share out to anyone who would like to share that and receive emails from anybody who has questions.